The Beatles, widely regarded as the most famous and influential band of the 20th century, formed in Liverpool in 1960. Initially, they played in the red light district of Hamburg, Germany, with Pete Best on drums, George Harrison on lead guitar, and Stuart Sutcliffe on bass alongside songwriters John Lennon and Paul McCartney. In 1961, Sutcliffe left the band to pursue painting, but by April 1962, he tragically passed away from a cerebral hemorrhage at just 21 years old. Years later, controversy arose when Sutcliffe's sister claimed the hemorrhage was caused by Lennon kicking Sutcliffe in the head during a fight. In 1962, shortly before recording their debut single Love Me Do, Pete Best was fired and replaced by Ringo Starr. This lineup, featuring Lennon, McCartney, Harrison, and Starr, became known as the Fab Four, and they quickly rose to counterculture icon status. Despite their incredible success, the Beatles' journey was not without its dark moments. After their split in 1970, the tragedies continued with Lennon's murder in 1980 and Harrison's death from lung cancer in 2001. Today, McCartney and Starr carry on the complex legacy of the Beatles, a band with an undeniably bright yet dark history. The Manson family's murders took place in a house rented by the controversial director Roman Polanski, who had recently risen to fame with his horror movie classic, Rosemary's Baby. One of the victims, Sharon Tate, was Polanski's wife and was 8 months pregnant at the time of her death. This horrific event followed other sudden and shocking tragedies linked to Polanski's film. According to conspiracy theories, Rosemary's Baby unleashed a curse that negatively impacted the lives of many people associated with the film, even those with only a tenuous connection. John Lennon, a friend of both Polanski and Mia Farrow, the film's star, lived for many years with Yoko Ono in the Dakota Hotel, where Rosemary's Baby was filmed, though it was called the Bramford in the movie. The Gothic building, constructed in the 1880s, perfectly conveyed the brooding, oppressive, and ominous mood of a movie about Satanists. The Dakota Hotel is also where John Lennon was assassinated by Mark David Chapman in 1980. Though Chapman was carrying a copy of The Catcher in the Rye at the time of the murder, which he later claimed was his inspiration to kill, the eerie connections to Rosemary's Baby persist in popular imagination. The friendship between John Lennon and Roman Polanski was not the only connection between the Beatles and Charles Manson, the mastermind behind the Tate LaBianca tragedy that shocked the world in 1969. Manson's off-kilter theology intricately incorporated the Beatles' lyrics. He perceived them as the four horsemen of the apocalypse and claimed that their songs provided direct inspiration for the manner in which his family carried out their misdeeds. Rumors have circulated for decades that Sgt. Pepper was actually Aleister Crowley, the controversial English occultist often referred to as the wickedest man in the world. The Beatles featured Crowley's face among the famous people they admired on the album cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. He's at the top left-hand corner in the back row, right next to Mae West. The album itself was released 20 years after Crowley's death. Some conspiracy theorists believe that when the Beatles opened the album by singing, "It was 20 years ago today Sgt. Pepper taught the band to play," they're declaring their allegiance to Crowley's occult and spiritual teachings. John Lennon may or may not have admitted this in one of his last interviews. The whole Beatle idea was to do what you want, right? To take your own responsibility, do what you want, and try not to harm other people, right? Do what thou willst, as long as it doesn't hurt somebody. Do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law, was one of Crowley's more famous teachings. John Riley was a dentist who befriended John Lennon, George Harrison, and their romantic partners at the time, Cynthia Lennon and Pattie Boyd, respectively. In March 1965, the two couples attended a dinner party hosted by Riley, who secretly spiked his guest coffee with LSD after dinner. This experience was a first for Lennon and Harrison, who had never experimented with LSD before this party. Sometime later, George Harrison would refer to Riley as the Wicked Dentist, and many speculate that Riley was the inspiration behind the Beatles song titled Dr. Robert, which was released in 1966 on Revolver. The song's lyrics, co-written by Lennon and McCartney, include Dr. Robert day or night. He'll be there any time at all. Dr. Robert, you're a new and better man. He helps you to understand. He does everything he can. Dr. Robert, if you're down, he'll pick you up. Dr. Robert, take a drink from his special cup. The Beatles ultimately enjoyed acid and used it consensually for years. One of the most persistent conspiracy theories surrounding the Beatles is that Paul McCartney perished in a car crash on November 9, 1966, and was replaced by a lookalike named William Shears Campbell, an orphan who had recently won a McCartney lookalike contest in Edinburgh. Those who believe the Paul is dead conspiracy are known as cloosters. One of their most popular claims is that John Lennon says, "I buried Paul" at the end of Strawberry Fields Forever. However, in an interview with Playboy magazine, Lennon maintained that the actual words were cranberry sauce. He told the interviewer, "I said cranberry sauce. That's all I said." Some people like ping pong, other people like digging over graves. Some people will do anything rather than be here now. Other hints that cloosters have dug up from the Beatles songs and album art include, supposedly there is a backmasked message on the song Revolution 9 from the White Album that says, "Turn me on, dead man." The photo of the Beatles on the cover of Abbey Road supposedly represents a funeral procession for Paul, who is walking out of sync with the other band members and carrying a cigarette in his right hand. Paul is left-handed. Also, a car license plate in the same photo displays the alphanumeric sequence 28IF, which allegedly means the real Paul would have been 28 that year if he had survived the accident. On the cover of Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, a hand is being held up behind Paul's head. A raised hand is a mystical symbol of expiration in some religions. Though these subtle messages have convinced some fans, there is no concrete evidence to suggest the switch actually happened. John Lennon and Paul McCartney believed in their fair share of conspiracies as well. McCartney himself was an early believer in the conspiracy theory that Lee Harvey Oswald was a patsy for the CIA. McCartney was first introduced to the idea by Mark Lane, the civil rights attorney whose book Rush to Judgment was one of the earliest to argue that Oswald had not, in fact, assassinated JFK. McCartney, who was keenly interested in the case, met Lane at a party and asked him for an advance copy of the book. Allegedly, McCartney was so convinced by Lane's evidence that he called the author a few days later, and the two went out to dinner to discuss the case. Rush to Judgment was highly controversial at the time and opened Lane up to all kinds of accusations and bad publicity. Nonetheless, unswayed by public opinion, Lane went on to make his book into a documentary. While editing the film, Lane was once again contacted by McCartney, who wanted to compose music for the film's score as a present to Lane. Lane tried to warn McCartney off, telling him that such a move could permanently damage the Beatles' career, especially in America. But McCartney was insistent. "One day," he said to Lane, "my children are going to ask me what I did with my life, and I can't just answer that I was a Beatle." Ultimately, the film's director chose not to involve McCartney in the production. The history involving Jimmy Savile, a former host of the British music chart show Top of the Pops, is deeply troubling. According to a UK National Health Service investigation, Savile is believed to have harmed at least 500 children, reflecting a horrific legacy of abuse. In the early 1960s, Savile was known to frequent a brothel with an unnamed pop group, who were suspected of mistreating the young girls trapped there. Police reports do not identify the pop group, but due to their close association with Savile at the time, speculation has linked them to the Beatles. Paul McCartney has acknowledged that he and the other Beatles found Savile's behavior a little bit suspect due to his odd demeanor. McCartney also commented on the era's atmosphere. It was a much more open scene. Free Love and The Pill had just come in, so it was a completely different scene. The other aspect, of course, is that we, though not quite Jimmy, we were of the age of the girls, we were all young. So if you're now talking about a 17 to 18-year-old boy with a 15-year-old girl, we all knew that was illegal. We knew it, and it was like, no. But the closer we were in age, of course, the less it seemed to matter. McCartney emphasizes that they were careful to avoid inappropriate contact with underage girls, but despite their caution, unsavory rumors have persisted over the years. The hand gesture commonly known as the devil horns or metal horns is indeed iconic in the world of heavy metal, symbolizing both U-rock and associations with the devil or the horned man. Ronnie James Dio and Gene Simmons of Kiss both claimed credit for popularizing the gesture. Dio stated he began using it before joining Black Sabbath in 1978, while Simmons integrated it into his persona as the Demon of Kiss. Interestingly, John Lennon was seen making a similar gesture in 1968 for the photographic and artistic content of the sleeve for the Beatles album Yellow Submarine. This predates the claims made by Dio and Simmons, suggesting Lennon might have been among the early adopters of this hand gesture in popular music imagery. The number 9 held a significant fascination and even a hint of fear for John Lennon throughout his life, often appearing at pivotal moments and serving as inspiration for his songwriting. In 1970, when asked about the inspiration behind Revolution 9 by Rolling Stone, Lennon explained, "Revolution 9 was an unconscious picture of what I actually think will happen when it happens, just like a drawing of a revolution. All the thing was made with loops. I had about 30 loops going, fed them onto one basic track. I was getting classical tapes, going upstairs and chopping them up, making it backwards and things like that, to get the sound effects. One thing was an engineer's testing voice saying, 'This is EMI test series number 9. I just cut up whatever he said and I'd number 9 it. 9 turned out to be my birthday and my lucky number and everything. I didn't realize it. It was just so funny, the voice saying number 9. It was like a joke bringing number 9 into it all the time. That's all it was.'" John Lennon, while celebrated as an icon of the peace and love movement of the 1960s, also had a darker side that he openly acknowledged in later years. He admitted to being physically and emotionally hurtful to his family and lovers, attributing his advocacy for peace and universal brotherhood as aspirations rather than reflections of his own behavior. Some of the incidents attributed to Lennon's hair-trigger temper include: he attacked Cavern Club DJ Bob Wooler after Wooler suggested Lennon and Beatles manager Brian Epstein were having a love affair. He was physically harmful and emotionally manipulative to his first wife, Cynthia, and their son, Julian. There are reports that he caused significant harm to his son, Sean, resulting in damage to the boy's hearing. There is an accusation from Stuart Sutcliffe's sister that Sutcliffe's fatal brain hemorrhage was caused by Lennon kicking him in the head during a fight. These aspects of Lennon's personal life are complex and often contrast sharply with his public persona as a proponent of peace and love. John Lennon's encounters with extraterrestrials, as recounted by him and his friend Uri Geller, add a fascinating layer to his life story. The first alleged encounter occurred on August 23, 1974, during Lennon's Lost Weekend period, when he was separated from Yoko Ono and living with May Pang. Lennon claimed that while sober, he saw a flying saucer hovering close to his apartment window. He and Pang attempted to photograph it, but the pictures showed nothing. According to Uri Geller, Lennon described a second encounter in New York City. Lennon allegedly woke to a bright light at his bedroom door and found 4 small aliens. He tried to chase them away, but they used telepathy to block him and stunned him. Lennon later woke up next to Yoko with an egg-shaped object in his hands, which he believed was a gift from the aliens. He kept this object for months before eventually passing it to Geller. Geller held on to the egg-shaped object until Lennon's death, after which he began showing it to people, turning it into a public curiosity. These accounts, part of Lennon's private experiences, blend his public persona with the mystique of the extraterrestrial encounters, adding another dimension to his complex life and beliefs. If you watch this video to the end, you will surely like this one. but don't forget to subscribe and turn the notifications on to never miss a video.